travelers, and welcome to Go See, Do, Explore.
Here we dive deep into the world of travel, sharing practical tips, can't-miss experiences, and the insights to help you make the most of every trip.
Whether you're a seasoned explorer or just starting to plan your next getaway, you're in the right place to get inspired and equipped.
I'm Christopher.
And I'm Ashley.
And together, we'll help you chart your next adventure, discover what to see and do, and share the stories that bring each place to life.
It's time to go, see, and do more. Let's explore. Hello, everybody, and welcome to this week's episode of the Go See, Do, Explore podcast. It is the first ever video version of this podcast. So if you are listening to it in your podcast app as audio only, nothing is different for you.
Yeah.
But if you are on YouTube, you can see us now.
I think what we're going to do is the audio will continue to come out on Saturday, but the video will be on Sunday now. Just a minor change. So if you're hearing this, it might be a different day than if you're seeing it. I guess it doesn't matter. But we're learning how to do this too. But hopefully this will be a nice addition and we can pop up some visuals from time to time. The video version. Should say we're recording this in Mexico City. And so behind us is either a beautiful view from the balcony in the room we're recording in, or if that didn't work, it's our kitchen. So we'll see how the virtual background replacement works. But yeah, anyway, you might be seeing a kitchen, you might be seeing a balcony view. But anyway.
So we thought this would be a good time to begin our recapping of our time here in Mexico City. We're going to first go through the itinerary and everything that we've done, but we will save the details for a future episode. It'll just be kind of a heads up of what's coming. And then we're going to kind of talk an overview of Mexico City.
Really looking forward to it. This has been a great trip.
All right. So our first day, we left Detroit and we flew Detroit to Monterrey and then Monterrey to Mexico City. What I found interesting about this is that people always say Aeromexico, it's a great airline to fly and you can get really good deals if you don't mind stopping in Mexico City. So we thought we'd be able to find a good deal on Aeromexico, Detroit to Mexico City. No.
Yeah. There's a reason for that, and it's called Delta Airlines.
Right.
Maybe we can go more in depth on that in another time, but basically because Aeromexico and Delta code share, and because Detroit is a Delta hub, the flights direct are provided by Delta, not by Aeromexico, and therefore are at Delta prices, not Aeromexico prices.
But I thought this Detroit to Monterrey was interesting because I guess Monterrey is also a big auto destination or an auto hub. They have a lot of automotive industry, just like Detroit. So I think that route, while they only run it, I think, once a day, is a lot of auto executives and people in the automotive industry. I just thought that was interesting.
Definitely.
So we landed in Mexico City and we took an Uber. We'll talk, I think, a little bit at some point about Uber in Mexico City. But we took an Uber to our hotel in the Centro Histórico area, which is the historic center of Mexico City. And we stayed in this really cool boutique hotel called Hotel Fontan Reforma. It's on Reforma Avenue, which is one of the main roads in Mexico City, especially in the historic center.
Yeah, this was a really great place to stay. And we walked, in our time in Centro Histórico, we walked almost all the time. Sometimes longer walks, 25-minute walks or so, but it was really easy to get around.
Yeah, I don't know if we'll talk about this hotel again, so this might be a good time to kind of dive into it.
Yeah, it was nice. It was, I would say, basic in that, the bathrooms were very basic. The rooms were fairly small. But it was nice. I mean, everything was comfortable.
Yeah, it was modern and it was clean. I think the funny thing about the bathroom is that it was basic, as you said, but also really modern. It had a bowl sink and a rain shower, but it was small. It was a tight space.
They also had a really nice water filtration, in the elevator lobby.
Yeah, in the hall.
If you don't know this, municipal water tends to not be potable in Mexico City, or in Mexico, in general. Most hotels will have some way of giving you potable water so you don't have to literally buy water, which is what people do. People who live here in Mexico buy giant jugs of bottled water. But yeah, so it's a nice machine.
I think we really enjoyed that hotel. They had a cool coffee shop in the lobby. It was a very modern, inviting lobby. They have a restaurant. They had 24-hour room service. and they had a really cool rooftop bar that was really, really cool with a nice view of the city. It's in a great location. It's, I think, what is it, is it 25-minute walk to the Zocalo about?
Yeah, I think so.
But
Maybe less if you don't have to dodge people. But
yeah,
you
if
always,
you're going,
pretty much always have to dodge
unless
people.
you're going in the middle, like, very
Yeah.
early in the morning. I would
Yeah.
say middle of the night, but like seriously, the places here, the restaurants, not restaurants, but like the taco stands are open until 5 a.m. So
Yeah.
it's a little different than a lot of other places that we've been in that way. But yeah, if you're looking for a place to stay in the historic center of Mexico City, we highly recommend that hotel, Hotel Fontan Reforma. It's a certified B Corp. We'll put a link in the show notes for sure. We highly recommend you stay there. The prices can't be beat.
Yeah. So the next day, the main event was a food tour. But before we had the food tour, we spent some time in the Templo Mayor, and there's a museum. What the Templo Mayor is there's an area we already mentioned in Centro Histórico called the Zocalo. And there are a few different things there. There's the National Palace. There's the Metropolitan Cathedral. A bunch of restaurants and all that too. The big Plaza de la Constitucion with the giant Mexican flag. I'm sure you've seen it if you've seen any videos of Mexico City. But immediately behind the Metropolitan Cathedral is this complex, the Templo Mayor, which is the old Aztec temple, or the Mexica temple, as we've learned this week, and part of their central complex of daily living. The Spanish basically tore it to the ground and built the cathedral over part of it. But there's excavation, and you can walk around the excavation and see a lot of the sort of the ruins and what is to see there. And then there's also a museum there that has a lot more artifacts and tells a lot of the stories of the Mexica people and their settling of, let's see, can I say this? Mexico Tenochtitlan? Is that how they say it now?
Tenochtitlan?
Well, we in school, we said Tenochtitlan, but no, I think they say Tenochtitlan because CH in Spanish is not. We grew up with German people, I guess. But that was really terrific. Amazing stuff that we'll maybe have opportunity to go into more in depth at some time. And then, as I said, we took a food tour. This was a great food tour. It was with a company called Eating with Carmen. No affiliation on our part, but we definitely would recommend them. And it was nice to zip around Centro Histórico on foot and visit a lot of the different kinds of foods that you can get in that part of Mexico City. The thing about Mexico City is that it definitely has its own food culture, but also a lot of the foods from different states in Mexico are represented in Mexico City. And you can find a lot of stuff. In fact, we had a lot of Yucatecan food throughout this trip, not being in the Yucatan, but nevertheless, it seems to be very popular here. Even just a few minutes ago, we're saying that pretty much every restaurant seems to have cochinita pibil, which is like definitely a classic Yucatecan dish. It's not really from here, but we have lots of great stuff. Were there any favorites on that for you?
I really loved I had a carnitas taco, which is pork kind of cooked in its own fat. I wrote about it in our LA trip.
Yeah.
When we went to, what was that?
El Momo.
Tacos El Momo, yeah, in LA. One of the coolest things about that tour is I had done a lot of food research ahead of time and about like taco places that you have to eat in Mexico City. And we went to several of them on that tour. So it kind of like checked a bunch of boxes.
A lot of times when we've gone on food tours, you're pretty disoriented because they take you around really quickly to all these different places. This one was to some degree that way too, but I also did feel like we got a better orientation of the Centro Histórico than we had previously. And one of the things about downtown Mexico City is organized in like, I don't know, there's a street for pharmacies, there's a street for shoe stores, there's like a street for musical instruments.
Yeah.
Like it's not distributed. The different types of businesses tend to be all kind of together. And so then later when we would walk by all these musical instruments, we would say, oh, we know where we are in the street with musical instruments. Kind of funny, but that was a nice way to get to know the city a little bit too on that tour, even as it was a little bit disorienting.
And it was nice because it was a totally private tour. It was just us and the guide.
Spoiler alert, we might be addicted to private tours now.
Yeah, we might have to change our tagline from travel by any means necessary to travel with our own personal guide. Because it was amazing and it made some of the tours that we had later in the week a little bit more difficult. Our third day we took another private tour to Teotihuacan, or Teotihuacan, as they say. It's a pre-Hispanic ruins. If you're familiar with Chichen Itza or Tulum, similar to that, except the civilization is older. It is a pre-Aztec civilization. I think we'll probably talk a lot more about it later in another episode. I just want to say right now, we went very early in the morning and we took a 7 a.m. tour, which is the earliest time that they offer it. And I would highly recommend that you go as early as possible. I know a lot of people like to sleep in on vacations. In this case, we got there before the gates were even open, and so we just hung out with our guide outside the gate, which was kind of funny. So one big thing that a lot of people will do here in Teotihuacan especially is take hot air balloons. We didn't do that because I think I prioritized having a private guide. But to get into the archaeological zone and to watch all of the balloons above the pyramids was pretty amazing.
Yeah, it was incredible. And our guide said that she had never seen so many. That was awesome.
We can post some pictures maybe.
We'll put it in the show notes. You can put it on the blog too, I'm sure at some point.
Another thing that was nice about getting there early, and this was similar when we were in Italy, you're getting there before the heat of the day and also before all the crowds. So we were, like I mentioned, we were there before the gates even opened. We were the first group in the door. We got to see a couple of the pyramids, like when there were just a handful of other people around. So yeah, definitely in general, when you're in any tourist place, set an alarm, take the early tour. You're not going to regret it.
We talked about this when we talked about visiting busy places too, like take the early tour and then in the middle of the day, go back and take a nap. Like you can sleep whenever on vacation. Okay, so the next day, we decided to go on what we thought that day was going to be a massive tour of Diego Rivera murals. That ended up getting caught into 2 days. We'll talk about that in a second. But as we mentioned the previous day, we took a tour of Teotihuacan with our guide, and she was asking us what other things we wanted to do in the week. And we mentioned that we had an interest in seeing Diego Rivera murals. If you don't know Diego Rivera, he's a pretty famous Mexican muralist, really prolific, did a lot of work. And
I think we talked about him a tiny bit in our top 10 things to do in Detroit episode a few back, because he has an amazing mural in the Detroit Institute of Arts, which the 2 tour guides that we told about that were surprised. They had no idea.
But because of that, and because of our feelings of connections to him as an artist, we wanted to see so many of his works that are here in Mexico City. And so our guide, Laila, decided to take us to the Diego Rivera Museum, which has some small works and then one big mural, which is an imagining of the history of Mexico inside of this public park that is in Mexico City, which the museum is right next to. This was an amazing mural. Some of this is going to end up in video for sure too, so you'll be able to see it later on. And then we went to Palacio de Bellas Artes. That has a few of his works. The most significant one is a remake of a mural that he was doing. He was commissioned by John Rockefeller to do a mural in Radio City Music Hall. And he did this mural, and Rockefeller basically hated it and destroyed it. And he got to remake it in Bellas Artes in Mexico City. We can see like essentially what it looked like. And there's another work in there too we saw, but all really amazing stuff.
And they also had, I mean, this is a temporary exhibit, but they had an exhibit that we saw that was Impressionists. I think all of the pieces were from the Dallas Art Museum. So if you're familiar with that museum, you were probably familiar with the pieces that we're talking about.
Yeah, it was branded as Monet and Matisse, but of course with many exhibits, there were a lot of other artists there too. And there was a lot of Impressionism, but there was also a lot of Post-Impressionism and like Impressionist adjacent works. And it was trying to show not only Impressionism, but the influence of Impressionism on other styles of art. That was interesting too. We love Impressionism too, so that was a nice thing we got to see. So we also intended to go to another place, which we'll talk about in a moment, but it was closed that day. So that was a day that we laid low and actually got to go to a cool Spanish restaurant, which we'll talk about when we talk about food. But we didn't do much else that day.
And I think we did our shopping for a tour.
Oh, yes, we did. We'll talk more about why we had to go shopping in a bit. But yeah, so that kind of wrapped up the non-food highlights of that day. Okay, so for our wine break, we are back here at home. Just got back from Mexico City. Haven't set up our video studio yet, so if you're watching on video, that's why we're on audio only here. But we're talking about a wine we had at a restaurant called Antolina in Condesa, and the name of the wine was Anónimo Tinto. It was a red wine from Valle de Guadalupe. What did you think?
My first thought, what's the word, on the nose? My first thought was that it was very fruity. You definitely get fruit like right away.
Yeah, it was also very tart, which I know you like.
Yes, I love an acidic wine, especially a red wine, because so oftentimes red wines are not acidic. That's typically a quality of white wines, especially rosés.
And so this was a biodynamic wine, which biodynamic wines and natural wines are very much in style right now. These are sort of wines of minimal intervention. And yeah, they're very in fashion right now.
Was the whole wine list at Antolina biodynamic?
A lot of it was. I don't remember if 100% of it was, but certainly a lot of it
I feel
was.
like all of the red wines were.
That could be, yeah.
There's no way to fact check this because they do not have a menu online.
Yeah. But that was our last Mexican wine probably for a while. Unfortunately, we didn't bring any home. We learned that at the duty-free in Mexico City airport, first of all, their wine did not look very good there, but also if you're flying out of Mexico but connecting domestically before you leave the country, you can't buy anything at the duty-free at the airport in Mexico City. Like, you try to buy some piece of fabric, and it was like, no, you have to be on an international flight to buy fabric. That was weird.
Yeah, that was strange. Another thing about their wine, too, was that it looked like it had been sitting there for a while. Like, there was a lot of dust on it, and it was sitting, like, bottle up, which is not a proper way to store wine. So for the amount of money that they were asking, that wine could be totally bad.
They wanted $50 US for some of these wines, which Mexican wine, it's just not usually that expensive. It felt like gouging. And anyway, and the Monterrey airport, which was the airport we left on our international flight, didn't have any wine. So
yeah, they're currently building their duty free. So maybe next time.
Yeah, next time we'll have to just buy wine in the city and check a bag, I guess.
We'll have to buy one of those wine enthusiast suitcases.
That's right. Okay, good wine break. We'll get back to the episode.
On the fifth day, we started out at the cathedral.
This is the Metropolitan Cathedral, the one of many churches, many churches in Mexico City, as you might imagine. But
Just like in Italy, there's churches everywhere.
Yeah, but it is the most important, most significant cathedral in Mexico City. It's pretty large. It is ornate. I actually don't know much about the style of the building.
It seems Gothic to me.
That may be. But there's a lot of art in there, and we got to basically walk around. They were having mass when we were in there, so we had to kind of be, respectful and not overly like, oh, what's this thing? But it was really cool to go in there. Beautiful church. We got to hear the organ, which we don't always get to hear in those churches, and it was a beautiful sound. That was really great.
And they ask that you not take pictures during Mass. There was one chapel that we didn't take any pictures in, but luckily the main one opened up, like they finished Mass. They were able to go take pictures and walk around, which was nice. But yeah, they have Mass at 12 and 12:30. So at two different chapels. Every church we walked into in Mexico City, they were having Mass.
We were always in there around noon, though.
I guess we need to change our time that we can churches here.
Yeah.
And after that, we met up with Laila again, and we went to the SEP.
Yeah, she calls it the SEP. It's the abbreviation for, it's basically the Secretary of Public Education, which in Spanish is SEP, not SPE.
I feel like we're probably going to have another episode where we just talk about all these murals. But this building, when it was designed, Diego and was it two other muralists were contracted to do murals throughout the entire courtyard of this building, which is enormous. I think she said there was like 120 murals.
Yeah.
It's so much. And by the end, I was like exhausted of looking at these murals. But it's funny because I guess Diego didn't like some of the other artists' work.
Right.
And so he knocked them down and put up his own.
So Diego Rivera was the art director of this project, and there were two other muralists. There are two courtyards. One of the courtyards is dedicated to work, and that was the courtyard that Diego Rivera was going to do all the murals for. The other courtyard was dedicated to like cultural celebration, and the two other muralists worked in there. And Laila explained to us that the other courtyard that the other two muralists did, Diego Rivera wasn't really happy with, so he took down some of the murals and did some. So when we were going there, I was thinking like, oh, okay, it's going to be like 70% these other muralists and maybe like 30% Diego Rivera. No, like it was mostly, the other one was mostly Diego Rivera.
No, I think
he took down most of the work.
Besides the ones that were of like the different states in Mexico, there were two that were not Diego.
And she also told us that very often he was working like 16, 17 hours a day on this project because of the technique that was required for these walls. A lot of the murals had to be done basically in a single go because then they applied something that sealed the mural in place. And so like you couldn't work on it over days or weeks. It had to be done, like some of them had to be done basically in a single day. So very long hours. We definitely gained an appreciation for his very distinct personality, but also like clearly his work ethic was insane.
And then after that, it was time for us to leave Hotel Fontaine Reforma and move here to Casa Cibeles by Lumina in Roma Norte.
Yes, we are here now in Roma Norte, which is a really fancy place. All right, so the next day we wanted to get oriented to this area, so we did a Roma and Condesa walking tour. Condesa is another neighborhood nearby. We learned that these were projects of the government, these neighborhoods basically to attract foreigners to live here. And so they are very European. Roma in particular is a very European feeling. You see a lot of buildings in the French style, but also you see these eclectic buildings. We saw one building in particular, it was crazy. It had like a British facade with a French roof line, and then the main entrance was Art Deco. It was really crazy.
It's very interesting. And there's the one that looks like a witch for some reason.
That was that same building. It has like a witch's hat on top of it too. For eyes. Yeah. They have a replica of the David in a park.
Parque de Rio de Janeiro.
It was renamed from Plaza Roma.
I was thinking the other day, though, how mad would the Florentines be that there is a David in what used to be Plaza del Roma?
Yeah, I don't know. I think the Italians are pretty chill about...
The Florentines are very attached to
David. They're definitely...
And they wouldn't like Rome getting the credit, but what do I know?
So we did that, and then we walked and saw lots of things that we could talk about. And we also went into Condesa, which has a beautiful public park, Parque Mexico, or Parque Mexico. Beautiful, huge public park. And Condesa has buildings that are all Art Deco, which is a style that we really love too. And so that was also very cool.
Yeah, it was like walking through Mexico City / Miami.
It was very Miami. The buildings.
They don't have the colors of it.
And like, I feel like picturing Miami without the ocean, it's hard to picture. There's no ocean here. But
there's no people walking around in bikinis.
Yeah. Imagine if they like dropped Miami Beach into Central Park. And that's kind of like what it is. And so we did that. And then we went straight to a neighborhood called San Ángel and took a cooking class with a lady named Lucia. It was amazing. We made sopes, we made quesadillas, but quesadillas here are a little different than what you think of. I think the quesadillas we have in the United States come from northern Mexico, which is like a flour tortilla and like a Monterey Jack kind of a cheese, or I guess cheddar. But in this part of Mexico, a quesadilla is you basically make a tortilla before you cook it, so still like raw masa, and then you put some stuffing in and you fold it over. So think like what an empanada looks like, but it's not an empanada. It's like the corn masa, and so then you fry it. And so it becomes this little pie of deliciousness.
Yeah.
We also got to try huitlacoche, which is a fungus that grows on corn. And maybe that sounds weird, but it's a lot like mushrooms.
Yeah, I don't know that I could tell the difference between that and the mushroom.
No, it was like just kind of a different flavored mushroom. And I think it's kind of like a mushroom, basically. It's just a mushroom that grows on corn. I don't know. What are the other highlights of the cooking class for you?
Oh, of course, the chili rellenos.
Oh, yes. We made chiles rellenos, the poblano chilies, stuffed with cheese and corn. Very good corn. Those were awesome.
Yeah.
And we got to hang out with Lucia in her beautiful garden in San Ángel. It was amazing.
Early on in this, I said to Lucia that Chris is the cook in this household. And she kind of laughed and she said, it's always the men that are the cooks that come to the cooking class. And I just thought that was kind of funny. So if you are someone that enjoys cooking, most likely you're a man, apparently.
If you're booking this anyway.
Yes. I definitely recommend that you do a cooking class like this in somebody's home. It was really cool. It was like getting to see a totally different part of Mexico City and just being welcomed into somebody's home and into their kitchen. And then they set a table for us out in their garden. We got to meet their dog.
This was one of a few experiences that we had that were just so personal. And for me, set this trip apart from many of the other trips we've taken. We'll put a link to Lucia's cooking class in the show notes. You should know that with Viator, we do get a small commission, but it doesn't affect you at all. It's the same price. And so if you're planning on going to Mexico City, we recommend this very highly.
Is it my day again?
It's your day. Oh, and you get a good one. Maybe the best one. So our guide, Laila, is back.
Yeah. And this time she's picking us up even earlier. 4:30 in the morning, we headed out to Xochimilco, which if you've never heard or if you've never done any sort of research into Mexico City, Xochimilco is once again a pre-Hispanic settlement that is these chiampas, which are artificial islands that were built into this lake of
Texcoco.
where before the Spanish arrived, these people were farming on these little islands. And so we went there very early in the morning. We got to kayak through the Chiampas and we got to see the sunrise. And then they took us to a farm and we met the two farmers. They made us an amazing breakfast and we got to see the cow that was born the day before. And we got to see the axolotl, which is an amphibian that is endangered. And they have a very specific species of axolotl that grow only in Xochimilco. So the farmers are kind of working to help keep this species alive. So we got to see that. It was unlike anything else we've ever done in our travels. I should also mention, I guess, that Xochimilco, what most people do when they come to Mexico City, they go to Xochimilco and they take these big trajinera boats and it becomes a big party. Smaller boats will pull up beside you. They'll play marimba music or a mariachi band, or they'll grill you food. And it's a lot of tours are sold in this like big party atmosphere. And that can be fun. And I'm not slamming that, but that's not what this was originally. It's not Xochimilco.
So we were intending to do the trajinera. We were going to go early, so at least it wasn't too crazy. We were going to go early and during the week. And it would have been a very typical Xochimilco experience for tourists. But this tour, again, it felt personal. Like, it was a tour. Like, it was designed for us as visitors. But nevertheless, like, being in this private environment with a very small group of people, being welcomed to this farm, what is, I think, an important time in the history of Xochimilco, with this attempt to bring back more agriculture in that place. I mean, one thing that you didn't mention that I think is important to mention is until the 1960s, they told us Xochimilco was the most productive agriculture site in the world by square yard, square meter, whatever, because they can have up to 9 harvests in a year. Mm-hmm. They can just grow constantly and they grow fast and they harvest fast. Anyway, Xochimilco is probably a topic for another day, but it was so special to be there and to be with them. We didn't feel like tourists in that moment. It just felt very personal and feel very connected. And so that was an amazing tour. That was another one that when we were talking with Laila on Monday, she told us that she does that tour, and we were sold right away.
But it did involve some purchasing.
Right. That was why we went shopping, because we had thought about kayaking, because there are other kayak tours there, but we ultimately decided against it. We just didn't have a lot of information, and so we didn't bring any of our kayak gear. We didn't bring good shoes for water. We didn't bring waterproof phone cases or anything like that. So we had to do a little shopping.
We got a more Mexico City experience by looking for specifically the waterproof phone case. And that was an interesting experience.
Yeah.
We bought shoes at the Crocs store. Not so authentic.
Yeah.
And then after that, because it was a very early morning tour, we still had time in our day. And we went over to Kayaking, which is a very artsy neighborhood in Mexico City. And it is the neighborhood that was home to Frida Kahlo and Diego Rivera. So we went to Frida's house, which is known as Casa Azul because it is blue. That's probably one of the number one tourist destinations in Mexico City. A lot of people, when they come here, that's what they want to see. They want to see Frida's house. Several of our tour guides were like, I don't understand why everybody loves Frida so much. It seems like the people of Mexico City much prefer Diego.
Yeah. What I've noticed is there's a big appreciation for Frida Kahlo and like who she was in her life, much more than for the art she produced. Not to take anything away from her art, but anyway, that was just the impression we got from locals.
Well, somebody said her art is so sad.
Well, that's true too, yeah. But it was great to see.
Oh yeah, I'm definitely glad we did it. Just one thing to mention, I don't know if we'll talk about Frida's house later. If you are coming to Mexico City and you are planning to visit, you need to book your tickets early. I would say of all the things we've done, this is the one thing that you really truly need to book in advance. I've mentioned before that I enjoy Facebook groups for planning trips and getting to know tips for a destination. There is a group, a Mexico City travel group, that I'm in on Facebook, and they'll tell you, like, there'll be an announcement like, oh, Frida tickets for this month now on sale, go buy them about a month and a half in advance. Otherwise, you're not going to be able to go to the museum, or you're going to be stuck buying a tour, buy a tour, get your guide, which we love those. But I don't know that in that case, in that museum, I don't know how much more you would have gotten out of it.
No.
I know we mentioned when we were in Italy that we really feel like our tour of the Accademia gave us more understanding of Michelangelo and the David, but I don't know that you necessarily need that for Casa Azul. So just something I wanted to mention. So.
Sorry if you're watching on YouTube and the light just changed. We're still working on this. It was getting dark, so I had to turn some lights on in here. We'll get much better, I promise. So that brings us to today. Today was a mega day of museum. We went to the Anthropology Museum. The Anthropology Museum is a huge museum. It is in Chapultepec Park, or the Chapultepec Forest, as they call it, Bosque, here in Mexico City. Giant city park, enormous, beautiful, really fun. The Anthropology Museum, also huge, and it has just a massive amount of pieces from the ancient Mexican civilizations. Starting with the Olmec, which is the oldest kind of known civilization here in Mexico, and working all the way through the Mexica, or the Aztecs.
To the Mayans.
And the Mayans, the Aztecs, of course, were conquered by the Spanish. The Aztecs sort of conquered all of the Mexican civilizations, and then 300 years later only were conquered by the Spanish. And then the Mayans still exist today. Important to note, something we could talk about sometime too, is that the Mayan civilization is still alive today. They sort of were able to hide from the Spanish, more or less. The Spanish weren't that interested in the Mayans relative to certainly the Mexica. And so just a massive amount of artifacts and history. We went on a guided tour for that, which was really helpful. People recommend this because it's an overwhelming museum, or has the potential to be overwhelming if you don't have someone to help you focus on what you should be looking at.
We did go with a larger group tour, and I was like, I miss Laila. If you're listening, watching, we miss you.
It was a good tour. It's just, you're in a large group. You have to kind of focus on everyone's interests. People ask questions that they clearly know the answers to show that they know the answers to them. We don't need to get into that. Please don't do that. That's an ugly behavior. If you know the answer, don't ask the question. Ask the question about something you don't know.
Right.
But anyway, we did that in the morning, and that was, about 3 hours almost we were there. And that really, honestly, had I to do it over again, I would have spent even more time there. I didn't feel like 3 hours. We definitely saw the highlights, but there was a lot more. There was like a whole second floor that we basically didn't get to see.
We didn't go to at all.
And then we walked through Chapultepec Park, and then we went to the Chapultepec Castle. Is that what it's called? It's been many things, this castle, but it's beautiful. It's up on a hill. It's at this high point in Mexico City, so you can see a lot of Mexico City from inside Chapultepec Park. Beautiful views. This building is kind of crazy. It was built before the French, right? I'm trying to remember when they said it was built. It was Spanish. The Spanish built it initially.
They said something about it was inspired by Versailles.
We can fact check this. But I believe that at least some of the structure was built by the Spanish at this upper point here in the city. And then certainly there was a time when the French occupied Mexico. An interesting history if you don't know about that. A lot of people aren't aware that the French were involved. It was because the Mexicans wanted to pause their debt payments. Then the French were not cool. about that. So they sent Habsburg to rule in Mexico, and he certainly built a lot of what's up there, Maximilian. And that was a thing for a while. And then the Mexican Republic was able to kick the French out. This is why they celebrate Cinco de Mayo, if you didn't know that.
The one thing that was really cool about the way this tour was organized, it was that you literally started with like the oldest pre-Hispanic civilization, and then you went all the way up to the Mexican Revolution. So it's like you got the whole history.
And so then the Mexican dictator that was obsessed with Europe, Porfirio Diaz, who I'm sure we'll talk about more some other time, made this place super, super opulent. He built like this top level that's basically a beautiful European style garden. He was a dictator with taste, for sure. We don't approve of dictators, but like he built some beautiful buildings for sure, and we got to see that. And then so now it's a public museum. It was, I think, the military academy for a while.
It was where the president lived. It was like their version of the White House.
I think that was why Porfirio Diaz was there.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then with the Mexican Revolution, they said this building belongs to the people. And so they opened it up as a museum.
And so there's the Museum of the Castle itself, and then there's also our National History Museum there, which we kind of breezed through today.
It had been a long day.
It had been a long day. That's when we come back. I say when we come back because certainly we'll be back to Mexico City. That's something we could spend more time in.
And then we got on a boat.
Yeah. Well, first we got tortas. So we have been in Mexico City for 8 days. I have had exactly one torta. I love tortas. It's like one of my favorite foods. And it's just like they have eluded us. We've had many other great foods, but we finally in Chapultepec Park today, I had an al pastor torta, and you had a milanesa, right? Torta. They were delicious. And we had gigantic agua fresca.
Gosh, they were so big.
It was like a pitcher, Ijima Scott, which I had horchata, which is really manageable. Horchata is really light and not super sweet. You had a pineapple one, which was like, you can't drink that much juice.
No, I don't know. I still swear that they like blended up a pineapple and then poured a bunch of sugar in it. It was like sweeter than a pineapple.
But it was delicious. And then we went over to, there's like a lake inside of the park, and we paddled a swan boat. We'd never done that before. No. It looked fun. It was pretty inexpensive, so we did that.
And now we're here recording podcast. In a little bit, we'll go get dinner. And tomorrow we are flying home.
So
I know.
This is going to be, though, like, and we might not do all these back to back. In fact, we probably won't, but we will have several more podcasts covering Mexico City more in depth. We also intend to produce a nice copy of our itinerary with our notes. This is something we're going to start doing for our trips. And if you're interested in that, go to goseedoexplore.com/support. You'll see the different ways which you can support our podcast if you're able. We really appreciate that. If you have the means to help us make this material, please do. But there are some there that you have access to, our itineraries and our trip notes, which could be really valuable if you're planning a trip to Mexico City. So we'll get that punched up and out there for you. But in the meantime, that's how you can get that. We'll have a lot more podcast content on this trip, including we're pretty sure we're going to be able to talk to our new favorite guide, Laila, and she'll get to talk a little bit more about some of what she does and her approach to helping tourists here in Mexico City.
Yeah, I think that's it for this episode.
Yeah.
I hope you're looking forward to, kind of diving in a little bit more into Mexico City.
Thank you.
We'll see you next week.
See you next time. That's all for today's episode of Go, See, Do, Explore. Thanks for joining us in sharing the wonder of travel.
If you want more from each episode, head to goseedoexplore.com, where you'll find blog posts, resources, and extras from our travels.
You can also reach us anytime at podcast@goseedoexplore.com. We love hearing from you.
And if you'd like to support the show, check out goseedoexplore.com/support.
We've got subscriber levels that unlock benefits like our full trip itineraries and notes, a private Discord for travel chat, and even postcards and souvenirs from our adventures.
Don't forget to rate and review the podcast. It helps more travelers like you find us.
Until next time, I'm Christopher.
And I'm Ashley.
Keep exploring, keep discovering, and we'll see you out there.